for him. I would ask you all to please turn off your cameras. Before we begin, I will ask Councillor John Mackay to lead us in prayer. Thank you, John.
Confess that it is true. Thank you that we can control our circumstances, all our situations. There's nothing that thou would bless us, Lord, as a committee, as a council, that would strengthen us to the author and the future of our Lord, that we would priority and life. As of ourselves, we are nothing. Thank thee, Lord, for us given patience to sinners to come. Died on the cross, such as we as a sacrifice to satisfy justice. Dear Lord, that we would serve this day. We pray for Chair and we pray for all the members. We pray for the Chief Executive and all the officers. Thank thee for them. Lord, we thank thee that wisdom to hold us all, and I pray that we would have wisdom from holy, true, and wise God, God who knows all. And we pray that we would have a spirit of God tells us to pray without ceasing. Lord, have mercy upon us. Far short of everybody. Thank you, Lord, that we can look upon thee at all times, and that we would set the Lord before us on this day. O Lord, for that day or an hour may be lives, as we have seen in past days. So pray, Lord, that thou would be at this time in this committee, that thy name would be glorified. Chief end of man is to glorify thee. Help us, Lord, in these things before us. Pardon us from all of our sins.
Okay, thank you very much, John. Just to remind everybody, the meeting is now being recorded. A few reminders on the conduct of the meeting, particularly as we are running the meeting in the chamber and remotely through Teams. If you are attending remotely and you are a member of the committee, please leave your camera on and your microphone off. If you are an officer, please leave both off unless you are speaking to an item or answering a question. I will call on the relevant officer to present their report. If a member or officer wishes to ask a question and raise a point, please do so in the chamber by pressing the central button on your microphone or by using the raise your hand function remotely. The microphones in the chamber operate a queuing system. 3 microphones plus the chair are live at all times, indicated by red light. A flashing green light indicates a mic is next in line to go live, and a solid green indicates a mic is in the queue to go live. Committee members will be given priority, and I will invite each member in the queue to speak and those with a raised hands attending remotely. After you have spoken, please ensure that your mic is turned off in the chamber or lower your hand and put your mic off if attending remotely. Those attending remotely, please ensure your device is positioned so that your image is clear to the other participants, and please speak clearly and concisely directly at the camera. When calling for agreement of recommendations at each item, you may do so by voice in the chamber and as indicated by a no-show of raised hands remotely. In regard to declarations of interest, members are reminded of the protocol. In the chamber, you must leave the meeting and sit in the members' area or by ending the call remotely. Following consideration of the item, you will be invited back into the meeting by the chair in the chamber or by the moderator if attending remotely. Please ensure you are available to accept the invite to rejoin. Finally, a reminder that the meeting is being live streamed and recorded. The recording will be made available on the Comhairle's website following the meeting. Item 15 will be taken in private at the end of the meeting. Prior to moving into private, participants other than the relevant officer and members of the committee will be asked to leave the virtual meeting. If necessary, there will be a short recess to allow for this process and to resume with the private item. Finally, a reminder that the meeting is being live streamed and recorded. The recording will be made available on the Comhairle's website following the meeting. We will now move to the formal business of the meeting. First item are the minute of meeting of 16th June 2021, and this is for approval. Are we happy to approve? Yes, thank you very much. Second item, minute of meeting of Northern Roads Collaboration Joint Committee of 5th March 2021. The minute is for noting, and there is a further item on the Joint Committee at item 11 on agenda relating to the 2021 annual report. Are we happy to note that? Yeah, okay, thank you. Item 3, declaration of interest. Members are asked to declare any interest they have in any items on the agenda. It will be helpful if members expressed why they are declaring an interest in the item concerned. Members in the chamber, please do so now by pressing your microphone or remotely through Teams by using the raised hand function. Please ensure the declaration is repeated prior to the relevant item and you adhere to the protocol as previously indicated. I see no declarations. Okay, thank you. Move on to item 4, performance management, and that's property and infrastructure. This report provides an overview of the property and infrastructure business plan progress and related performance for Q1 2021-22. Callum Mackenzie will speak to the report and answer any questions. Callum.
Thank you, Chairman. I won't go into the report in much detail. I'll just highlight some of the financial pressures that we're under just now. One of them relates to project delivery that you'll see in the table in the report as well. With the levels of capital investment reduced, then the recharge rates that we have to take back into the budget are not being recovered fully. But we're doing some work with finance on that to see how we can actually look at the recharge rates there. There is pressure on the roads budget. We've taken significant savings out of revenue, and we've got restricted levels of capital for resurfacing for the next couple of years. So we're just managing that budget as best we can. We do have some issues with some road structures just now. Burnera Bridge you'll be aware of, that's progressing well. The structure has now touched down on the Burnera side, and we continue to make good progress on that. There is a financial shortfall, however, on that project of 1.1 million. We've also got some other structures which we need to do emergency works on. One of these is in Lochanob and Barra, and we've got the bridge in Calbost and a bridge in Marrig that was washed out previously. So these are putting financial pressures on us. We have made a bid to the Scottish Government's £30 million fund for bridges, and we're just waiting to hear back on success with these funding applications. There is continued pressure on our property repairs and maintenance budget. Our infrastructure is ageing, and we are having to react to investment requirements as best we can. So there is constant pressure on that budget as well. So I'm happy to take any questions on the remainder of the report, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Callum. Does anybody have any questions for Callum on this item?
Chairman, Councillor Robertson Tablet.
Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you very much, Calla. I think the Burnera Bridge situation is still causing concern, because months and months ago we were led to believe that the Scottish Government were going to provide the additional funding. I think we had an assurance from the local MSP. I'm surprised that things haven't been resolved at this late stage. Is that a problem?
Callum,
Well,
Yes, it was specifically mentioned by Kate Forbes in Parliament, of course, Alistair, you know, months ago. And I know Callum's dealt with Transport Scotland this issue a few times. Callum, you want to come in?
I would just say the fund that was referred to was allocated to Transport Scotland to put an application process in place for it. That closed in the middle of July. We got applications in for 10 of our structures. We did chase this up on a number of occasions to see if there should be any progress with the applications or any determination on them. But the last response was that they were still evaluating the applications.
Well, I think that's pretty disappointing after the assurances we were given and the importance of this structure being completed. We now resources and funding is under severe strain, and it would be extremely disappointing if this funding wasn't forthcoming after the assurances we had been given. Thank you.
So, Convener.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to Alistair for raising the matter of the finance. I think it's beyond credibility that the Scottish Government haven't given even an indication of the additional finance that's required for the bridge. The bridge is actually going to be complete in early October, and it's ridiculous that you wouldn't do that with any kind of structure, that you build the structure and then find out whether you've got the money to pay for it or not. And I do think we should be making very strong representations, as Mr MacLeod said, to the Scottish Government and Transport Scotland to get comfort that we're not going to be left with an asset that isn't really an asset. It's going to be eating into the rest of the transport infrastructure right across the islands. And there was a clear commitment at the start that would be done. And we're talking about now 10 months later, you know, before we get any kind of resolution to this.
Thank you, Convener. I'm quite happy to write to the Cabinet Secretary on this issue. I have dealt with it on a number of other issues, if that would be helpful. Leader?
Yeah, just some of the background. I mean, this goes back to a meeting that we had with Kate Forbes, myself and Robert Emmett, and we raised the issue then because the bridge incident had occurred. It wasn't something that we could delay. We had to proceed speedily with it, and she indicated then that she would look at getting us support. In between times, we wrote to Michael Mallison, Cabinet Secretary, and his response conveyed by the MSP, Alistair Allen, was that you get money for roads and sort it out yourselves, basically. But we went back in, and Kate Forbes then assured us that there was money coming specifically for bridges, and it would contribute to the Bernard Bridge. And as Colin Mackenzie has just indicated, we haven't had any confirmation of that as yet, which is really unsatisfactory. We have written on a couple of occasions. I wrote again saying this bridge is about to start, and it would be good to get it into this financial year. So that was pre-March. And so that deadline has slipped. So I think we do need to go back and get some sort of clarity about what they're contributing to it. At the minute, I think Mr Mackenzie's understanding is that our bids are in, and Bernard Bridge is one of them. But we thought we would have an assurance on that particular project some time ago. So I suggest that, yeah, go back, and I know that you've been in touch, Chairman, so I think we should go back and another reminder that the bridge is almost complete and we still haven't got the confirmation of their contribution. I think one thing to say in context is that part of our argument was they give 5 to 7 million to Orkney for their internal ferries, which is good and quite right. But we were making the point that we've got rid of quite a number of ferries and we've got bridges. And it's the same thing, internal infrastructure. So if they can support one island, why can't they support another? Even the element of fairness. So I think Kate Forbes understood that. I think that's why they were looking at helping us. So yeah, it would be good to get some certainty on that.
Okay, Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just inquiring as to how we got a final cost for the Wendy Bridge.
Callum, you want to? I've heard some extreme costs mentioned in the passing, but I think it's 3.1 million, isn't it?
So that's right, Chair, 3.1 million.
Thanks.
Convener?
Thank you, Chair. Alongside the cost of the bridge itself, there is a significant pressure on other services that the Comhairle provides as well. They're doing shuttle service across the bridge with pickups, collecting all the refuse bins and taking them across to the other side of the bridge so that it can be picked up by the waste lorries. So there is a significant amount of money related to that as well. But also the people who are resident in the islands, they're finding it very difficult, particularly those who are building houses. They're finding it very difficult to get materials across without having a significant cost associated with that as well. So I do think it's the bridge is quite clearly our focus, but we also have to be aware of the other aspects of that as well, and how that's going to be resolved. It's going to be quite challenging for us, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that, Convener. Anybody else? Any further questions for Callum and anything else? Councillor Kenny John MacLeod.
Thank you. Just note in the report the potential investment requirement for Scalfie Bridge. I know it's not of the age of the bridge is nothing like the Bernard Bridge, but I remember a number of years ago we were advised that there was a need for an imminent investment, which did not take place then, and we're looking at a significant commitment, a potential of was it 2.5 million in the next few years. I'm just wondering what the risks associated with that, and has that been properly evaluated? Obviously, there's a good notion of spending money early to prevent more rapid deterioration of that kind of infrastructure. But what is the nature of the risk, and is that call on capital likely to come in that time frame, or could it be put further back? I don't have any idea of what the risk associated with that is, and how imperative it is to have that as an early item in a capital programme, or can it be deferred, or can it be done in an iterative basis? I know when you do it piece by piece, it can end up costing more. I'm just not sure where we're at with that. So maybe Mr. Mackenzie might be able to give some light to that.
Callum.
Scalfie Bridge. Yes, we had an inspection report that highlighted that requirement for corrosion treatment and protection. So there was an agreement or a discussion through the preparation of the current investment programme that investment could be deferred into the next period, but done early in the next programme. So that's the technical and structural advice as to the requirement for the work. We did include that in the list of bids to Scottish Government as well, out of this £30 million fund.
You happy with that, Kenny John? Councillor McNeill.
Thank you, Chair. I see at 11.7 that you've got bridge structures, and you must also highlight the remedial works. Could you explain, Carla, what these remedial works are and what structures?
What structures are used and what remedial works, Callum?
Specifically, we were looking at the North Ford structures. I can't remember off the top of my head exactly what works, but all our bridge structures have been assessed, and where remedial works are required, they've been put into a prioritised list and programme. The top 10 of these have been submitted with their application to Scottish Government for additional funding, but we have been working through that priority list. So the likes of used, we are looking at the likes of the North Ford bridges.
Councillor McNeill, do you want to come back?
Yes, would it be possible to get the full list for that, Colin?
Happy to do so. Happy to give you the road structure priority list for investment.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Callum. Any further questions for Callum? No, thank you very much, Colin. Right, we move on to item 5. This reports provide an overview of the Communities Directorate Business Plan progress and related performance Q1 2021-22. The area of relevance to this committee is the municipal services at section 6.13 to 6.19 of the report. David MacLeod will speak to the report and answer any questions. David, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the service delivery, all service areas have maintained function, but we are continuing with a cautious approach, even although some of the COVID protocols have reduced. That's really just to prevent any serious disruption to services due to isolation or close contacts through COVID. The contract's been awarded for youth school transport. This has resulted in a cost increase of about 70k per annum, and that's reflected in the financial figures. We also noticed during May, June and July that there has been an 11.2% increase in waste arisings, which has placed a significant amount of pressure on collection services, with many routes having to have an extra run to complete the run and ensure all bins have been emptied. We've also had quite a lot of pressure on recycling banks and community skips that have been filling up, probably filling up in a week, whereas previously we would expect them to last up to 4 weeks. The contract for the new cell at Benrov landfill has been awarded, and work's progressing on that. And there's details in a subsequent report, but we have had an application to Scottish Government's Recycling Improvement Fund past the stage 1 application stage into stage 2, and it's hoped that this will allow us to enhance the rollout of new services. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Okay, David. Anybody got any questions for David on this item? Councillor Fulton.
Thanks, Chair. Whilst recognising the strain on municipal services over the summer months, we also have to recognise the issues faced by the community I represent, Harris and South Lochs, over this period. As David pointed out, waste was at huge levels with a 11.2% increase, and skips full on a more than regular basis. The Uriga skip recycling facility was at full capacity for the duration of the summer months, as were all the community skips around the island, overflowing, with lots of bad press on social media at areas like Luscantire, where we had associated fly tipping due to the recycling bins not being full and not having the capacity to empty them. So hopefully the additional skips mentioned in the report will resolve this issue. But my question is, will there be a strategy? I know we mentioned a strategy for the Western Isles to cope with tourism earlier in the year, but will there be a concrete strategy put in place for next summer to alleviate these problems? The Western Isles, as we all know, is being pushed very strongly as a tourist destination, but I feel we don't currently have the facilities and infrastructure to cope with the associated pressures. Just one other question. Is there any update on the curbside recycling rollout outside of the Leverburgh and Tarbert areas, which already exist? And just on the report, I note that there was a complaint associated with Uriga depot, and just how was this resolved? Thanks, Chair.
Do you want to pick up on that last point just now, David, because it's been discussed in the report at 9? Do you want to cover it just now, or what?
Chair, I'd be happy to come back on the curbside rollout in the waste management report that's further on. I can't really comment on individual reports, but individual complaints, but they are addressed, as they come in. In terms of looking at the strategy going forward, you will note, Chair, that there's also a report on cleansing vehicle replacement, and we have had issues with the reliability of the skip lorries that we use at the moment. They're early Euro 6 vehicles, and they've had quite a lot of issues that have resulted in us having to use older vehicles, which then subsequently puts pressure on them. So there's also a report on cleansing vehicles on the agenda, and happy to discuss it there.
Do we have anything on a strategy for next year? I know the last applications we had to the Rural Tourism Infrastructure Fund, I think the last couple of times have been unsuccessful, if my memory serves me right. I'm not sure why, but are you happy with that response, Councillor Fulton, for the moment? And we'll discuss the other part later on. Councillor Mackay.
Well, similarly to Councillor Fulton, we have the same problems in this. And at some point, we had to close the site because the skips were full in a few days. And I put in my complaint or whatever, and I was told they were getting new skips, but it's really been frustrating. People are leaving. There's rubbish fly tipping really all over the moor and everywhere. So I would like to see these extra skips come, and I hope we'll get our share. We'll get our share of that, because it's been very frustrating. People have been coming to me, and of course I couldn't do anything but just get in touch with David and the department there. But so far, but we're fine now. The bulk of the tourists are away, and the place is quieter. But still, it's not enough. It's not good enough.
Well, we appreciate there's a problem, and hopefully we can do something to resolve it by next year. Councillor McNeill.
Well, thank you, Chair. I would just like to echo what Councillor Fulton and Mackay have said. We've had lots of issues with capacity for waste, particularly for tourists and used and in Barra. And I've had many a phone call with the office in Benbeckel. They've been very helpful. I'll be looking at new skips in any form, or what can we do to solve this problem going forward?
We have ordered new skips, haven't we, David?
Yes, Chair, they're going through the process at the moment. We haven't got a delivery date yet, but we would expect them to be with us within the next probably 6 to 8 weeks.
Is that just skips, or is it various bins for our recycling stuff and bottle banks and stuff?
It's a mix.
Okay. Thank you, David.
Okay, thank you very much, David. Councillor Morrison, I think you had your light on there.
I did, Chair, but that partly answered my question. But just following on from that point that Councillor McNeill said, could we get a list of where these new skips are going to be deployed, David? I've been trying to get a skip for some time in an area. I know that the people that have the skips are complaining about them being full, but we've got an area in Lochs where there's no skip at all. The skip was removed, and it hasn't been there now for about 18 months.
I think they're all going to Used, actually, Councillor Morrison.
Used them now.
Do you want to come back on Councillor Morrison's question, David?
Chair, we will look at what we can do prior to the start of next season to try and make it more efficient than it has been. I think having vehicles that are more reliable will help us, and having access to more skips will make the service run more efficiently. I think we have to also realise that a lot of the issues that we've had over the summer does not put any additional funding into the service. So we'll have to have a look and see what we can do to try and facilitate the number of visitors that come to sites that don't have bins, for example. So, you know, that's a bit of a challenge for us. Certainly looking at some of the waste arisings, it's quite clear that they're not going into either household bins or commercial bins for the likes of hotels or guest houses, etc. So that they must be going into you know, sort of what we would class as litter bins that we're not getting any income stream for. So we'll have to have a look and see what we can do in the context of us trying to run the service on less money each year.
Leader.
And just to follow on from what Councillor Fulton was saying, I think it'd be really sensible for us to look to have by the end of January a plan for next summer. I mean, there are ongoing issues that Councillor Morrison has spoken about, but certainly during the summer months, you know, we do know we're going to have an issue. We do know we've got challenges. We do know we're going to get tourists. So we can't, you know, put our head in the sand. Can we have a plan as to what we're going to do next summer? And then we can look at costing it. But we need to have a plan to cater for what we know is going to be a challenge. And it'd be good if Councillor Fulton and anybody else from Councillor McNeill would feed into whatever mechanism David puts in place, feed information in, and then let's see what comes out the other end. And let's have a target of, say, the end. I mean, it'll be too late if we're talking about this in March or April. Yeah. So if we aim for the end of January to have a plan to see that can cope with these issues, then let's try and do that. I just think it's important to do it.
Okay, thank you, Leader. Convener.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to this past summer, and people can start making excuses that it's since the pandemic has been to some extent it's been alleviated. There is a major concern about the number of camper vans that are coming onto the island, and I really think that we should try and find some way of getting an appropriate levy when the camper vans go on to the ferries. We should have a discussion with CalMac in relation to that, and we should also be asking them how long they're going to be staying, whichever island that they're in, that we should be getting some income to offset some of the damage that's being caused by camper vans in particular. It's very different when you've got people in self-catering. That's a very different side of it. But it's really important that we certainly welcome people to come to the islands and work their way right through the islands. But we do need to get some kind of revenue associated with that, because it's costing us as a council a huge amount of money, and without being too specific about it, there are also camper vans who dump their waste not in the sites where it can be picked up. They just do it wherever it suits them, and again, that's not appropriate behaviour for people coming onto the island and using the facilities. So I do think we should have a conversation about getting some kind of levy for people who are coming onto the islands with camper vans in particular, so that it offsets some of the costs associated with it.
Okay, thank you, Convener. Councillor MacLeod, then Councillor Fulton.
I'm not going to go into regurgitation mode, but I agree with the Convener. There is an issue, and it's becoming a bigger and bigger issue. Not just camper vans. A problem during the summer. There's a volume of litter, we just can't cope with it, and removing litter costs resources. And we should be looking at solutions. On the Convener's suggestion, I think it's very appropriate. The camper vans come across, as far as I'm aware, the CalMac don't charge them all that much, and there should be a levy on them. Nothing against camper vans in particular. But we have to look at solutions and not just dump the issues with our officers, because we need innovative and creative solutions. We need extra resources, wherever they're going to come from, because this issue won't go away. It'll get bigger and bigger, I think, in the years to come, because this is such an attractive destination. We even have camper vans in Point, believe it or not.
Oh, jeez. Councillor Fulton, and then Councillor MacLeod.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I would strongly support the Convener on what he just stated. The size of the camper vans this year has been notable. 8.5 metres and upwards, and just not appropriate for some of the single track roads they're driving on, causing chaos on the roads. But probably more importantly is a number of hotels in Harris and B&Bs were not at full occupancy because their visitors couldn't get over on the ferry due to the amount of camper vans on the ferries. A large 8-metre camper van will take up a space of three cars. I needed to get off Eilean on a couple of occasions for emergencies this year, and was extremely difficult to get bookings, and that's been experienced by everyone on the island. And again, I'm not going to regurgitate that. You're well versed in it, Ushton. Yeah. But yeah, I would strongly support the convener on that.
Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a word of maybe caution for David and his procurement of skips. It's something I had to do recently for our commercial operations, and we're being quoted 12-month delivery times due to the current climate. So maybe the sooner that order gets in, the better.
Have you put the order in, David, actually? Yeah.
It's certainly out for pricing. I'm not sure whether we've confirmed the actual order yet, but skips tend to be, because they're low tech, as long as there's steel available, they're usually fairly straightforward to procure. But I suppose that's the proviso, is as long as there's steel available.
I think there's problems with steel at the moment, as far as I know. Okay, David, thank you. I've got Councillor Ian M. Macaulay next. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, again, don't want to go over the same ground again, but totally agree with the convener. This was mentioned 2 or 3 years ago, and nothing was done. We really need some kind of levy or something. I was on the burner to leave about a ferry in the last week or two. I'm not sure what the capacity is of that ferry, probably 25 to 30 cars, but 15 camper vans were on that ferry. It's not a big ferry, so it is stopping, as it was rightly pointed out, hotel trade and even locals coming up and down the islands. The other aspects are Pier number 1 is still being abused by these camper vans, in that they're parking there, and it is turning into a caravan site at some point. The sign that was put up just isn't adequate, and it's been ignored. But yeah, I think definitely we should be looking into it in more detail. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Everybody's agreeing with the convener today. It's a good day for you, convener, clearly. Councillor Finnegan.
Thanks. Not a member of your committee, Chair. Just to follow on from what the convener said, and just great for him to bring it up. You know, I brought it up before recently, and in fact, we're looking at this now. Councillor Mitchell brought this up 4 years ago. It was originally his sort of idea, and I've seen nothing happen in those 4 years. And I would really like to see what action now will be taken from this meeting, and how we will actually start to take this forward and look at it. And it's not just the camper vans; it's the whole levy issue in terms of B&Bs. And there's a number of difficulties with it, obviously, but obviously where there's a will, there's a way, and we have to do something. There were no foreign tourists here this year, very few. And when they start coming back next year, Harris is going to be, it's just going to sink. There's going to be so many people on it, it's going to sink. So we need to start actually putting a policy in place now, and I'd just like to see how that's going to now be taken forward at this meeting. Thank you.
Can we go to Councillor Norman MacDonald then?
Sorry, guys, I think the sound seems to be disappearing here. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we're hearing you, and we're seeing you as well.
while the sound's gone down to a really low level. Yeah, I'm not a member of the committee, not a McDonald's Row. Can I ask David? I believe there was an issue with overflow, obviously, that everybody's been mentioning, but I believe that some of these skips are private skips in some of the campsites, etc., and they pay for the uplift of and the emptying of these skips. And I wholeheartedly support what the leader has said about a plan for January to alleviate the issue going forward for the next summer tour season. Is there an issue with the uplift of some of these skips where the uplift is paid for by private skip rentals at campsites, etc., that they're not willing to, or they certainly haven't put the mechanism in place to pay for additional uplift, and there's an issue there? Would you care to comment on that, David?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not aware of any issues. We don't provide any skips to campsites that I'm aware of. There may be private sector arrangements with skip hire companies that we're not party to. In terms of provision, we usually provide commercial properties with access to bins of a specific size that meets their needs through a bin contract. But I'm not aware of any that are not paying for the service. I think there have been issues where passing camper vans, for example, have been using site bins for sites that they're not paying for, and that can be a concern. In terms of going forward, I'm happy to look at arranging a presentation to T&I MAUG later in the year to discuss options.
Yeah, thanks, David. I'm not saying that they're not paying for the uplift. I'm saying that they could be paying for additional uplift. Is that the case?
I'm not aware of any specific cases of the type that you're suggesting. So the frequency of bin collections is determined by whatever contract a commercial premises has. I think one of the issues that we have with things like hired large camper vans is that they are a commercial operation, albeit a mobile one, but they don't have any sort of bin contract or any sort of recognised way of paying for their waste. Whereas if you were a B&B or a guest house or a self-catering accommodation, you would have a bin that you pay for. You can rent out a huge big camper van and have your whole family in it and travel around and expect to get free bin disposal. So I think that is an issue for both us and other areas like the Highlands and Islands. So.
I think what I'm trying to get at, David, is with a bin contract with a commercial establishment, or whether it be a campsite or whatever, if they have a commercial arrangement where their bins get picked up, the skips get picked up once a fortnight, and if that skip is filled within the first 3 days of that contract, and then they're overflowing and they're left like that until the fortnight replenishment, is it incumbent upon them, if they wish to, can they pay for additional uplift so that they get an uplift maybe once a week? Do they have that option?
Most of virtually all of our locations, we can accommodate a weekly uplift rather than a fortnightly. There are a few areas where we're not in specifically, within the fortnight. Berna, for example, the bin lorry only goes over there once a fortnight, and at the moment they're having to do it with on a bit of a Heath Robinson means. So, but for example, the majority of areas in Harris, there is a bin lorry going down, passing most areas once a week, so we can accommodate an extra uplift if needs be, but that would have to be at the request of the premises. If they need additional bin capacity, then they can either do it by increasing the frequency or paying for extra bins.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with particular reference to Horgabos, I've seen the bins there overflowing. I think I spoke to maybe yourself before about this, and they said that they can pay for additional uplift. I'm not sure is that the case, or is that my understanding of it. But if they're only getting picked up once a fortnight and they're full within the first 3 days of being emptied, is it incumbent upon them to arrange for additional uplift and pay for it?
Yeah, well, it is, yeah, because if they're a commercial operation, it's up to them to have
The bounce back normally is that it's the corner that's not picking up the waste. That's what's happening. It needs to be perfectly plainly spelled out. That these are not. It's not incumbent upon the council to be picking these things up. If it's a commercial operation that's overflowing, it's a difficult one, I know, but Horgabos particularly is a focus because it's such a prime location. And the bins there have been overflowing practically all of the summer, and I've seen it myself. If they're overflowing, then surely the common sense thing would be for the commercial operator to arrange for additional pickup. That's the point I was trying to make.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yep, I just want us to, we can reinforce that with commercial operators around bins and skips. I don't want us to lose sight of this idea of the levy, because it does seem that there's a will within the committee to pursue that more actively. I know that we discussed it late in Robert Emmett's time here, because we were granted by government the right to start raising tourism tax. So, as a committee, could we ask you at your next meeting of Transport Scotland and CalMac, because I can't see where we can. The easiest way to impose a levy is obviously when they're booking the ferry. And if we got cooperation between CalMac's system where they could impose a levy, even if part of that levy was to remunerate CalMac. But in any event, can we as a committee agree to ask you to raise that issue with Transport Scotland and CalMac at your next meeting?
Yeah, we've got...
if the committee are agreeable to that.
We've got a meeting on Friday with we're also waiting for the outcome of RET legislation. Pricing structures and terms of nets and there's a lot going on. And I take Councillor Finning's point. There are a number of hands up here. All right. Not hearing me. Are you hearing me now in committee room 1?
Chair, I think the chamber sound has been turned off. We can't hear you online.
Malcolm, you're sitting there.
Can you hear this mic?
That's better.
That's better, Houston.
No,
that wasn't me though.
That was Malcolm Nichol. Can you hear this mic okay?
Mm-hmm, I can hear.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
Are you hearing me, Paul? Is it on now?
That's it on now.
Okay. Right, Kenny John MacLeod.
Thank you, Chair. The system seems a bit fickle in the early stages of it, but really the leader has said more or less what I was going to suggest there. I think I'm certainly persuaded. I think it seems to be unanimity really that the best way of addressing this is by introducing a levy. When this was initially discussed some year and a half, 2 years ago, the only reservation I had at that time was just that there'd be cost efficiency in the collection and means of collection, and that requires cooperation from CalMac, I would think, in order to facilitate that. And David made a very good point. I mean, if it was a commercial bed and breakfast operation working locally, they would be paying commercial bin rates for the use of the refuse generated in the course of that staycation or whatever. And we don't have any means of referring it back to the hirer of the camper van. So the user would, imposing a levy on the user is certainly the most effective way of doing that, and will address really the costs associated with it. We don't want to discourage people from the island to coming to the islands, but we certainly want to make their experience as positive as possible, and any concerns to do with the waste and the polluting the environment, we'd certainly don't want that to be the headline rather than the the appeal of the island. So I certainly would support an early move to begin negotiations with CalMac to see how that can be introduced.
It is something we have raised, of course, with CalMac and Transport Scotland, and this is where past the partial starts to happen. But Keith Dodson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's the old cliche that if you want the tourists, we have to cater for them. The thing is that, and I've said this before, that the Western Isles get a lot of free publicity. I mean, we have one of the best beaches in Europe. We're in the top 20 of the places in the world to visit, etc. So you can understand why we get a lot of tourists coming up. And the fact is they're bringing their mobile homes, etc., etc. Gone are the days when you used to see a touring caravan, because that costs quite expense if they came on the CalMac because of the length, etc. I'm just wondering, a lot of it at the end of the day is down to education. And I'm just wondering if we cannot, I don't know whether through the tourist office or whether through CalMac, whether a leaflet can be given to these owners of these mobile vans when they come, explaining exactly what we would like them to do when they come to visit our islands, etc. Where to go, where to blah blah blah, etc. You know, so I welcome. A lot of people say, "Oh, they don't spend money." They do spend money onto the islands, etc. And if they go back with an adverse report on the islands, then it certainly spreads. So I think really it's down to education. Now, I'm just wondering, as you mentioned, whether CalMac or through the tourist office, whether a leaflet can be given to these people when they come and explaining what we would like them to do.
They are being given a leaflet, Keith, prepared by the Comhairle and Outer Hebrides Tourism. They are being given a very good leaflet currently, yep. So, Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. John Mitchell, Harrison, South Lochs, not a member of your committee. I'd like to go back to the camper vans issue again. I mean, I've stayed in Harris for over 42 years, and I've never, ever seen a situation as bad as this summer. It's absolutely shocking. My mailbag is full of reasonable people responses, but some unreasonable ones. They want to ban camper vans altogether, saying that they don't contribute much to the economy. I do agree with Councillor Dodson. This is just an anecdotal story, it's not true. I mean, most of them park by the distillery and they come out with their bags of gin, park by the Harris Tweed shop, come out with their bags of tweed. So they do, in fact, contribute significantly to the economy. But if you, 2 weeks ago, and I'm sure, and I do back up what Councillor Fulton and Councillor Finnegan has said, and they will remember that 2 weeks ago, there were 21 camper vans parking in Luscantire Cemetery. A lorry was trying to deliver a heavy lorry goods to one of the local people. The road was closed for 3.5 hours. And attempt, while some of these camper vans are parking overnight, to have a funeral there is often diabolical. And many people that return to Airbnb, for example, used to describe the 3 miles to Luscantire or the Bays Road as challenging. They're now referring to it as suicidal in many ways. Try to stay on the road with all these, and as somebody mentioned, and Councillor Fulton mentioned, it just seems to be getting bigger, longer and wider. Now, I think that the situation is a multifaceted problem, and as such requires a multifaceted solution. And I know it's discussed at many forums through Harris Forum, the Harris Development Limited and so on, just to fling maybe half a dozen of these issues. And I do take the leader's point. You know, we cannot wait to February or March or early April. It's too late. We have to get together in January and have a plan. Now, there's about half a dozen issues that I've just scribbled down here. We are in Harris looking at, and as the convener says, we're missing an opportunity as well here, in that these people are overnight parking, they're wild camping, they're paying no parking fees, and we're missing an opportunity to bring something back into the pot that could contribute to the infrastructure. So we're looking at the moment at parking charges. I mean, there's that lovely spot at Nishabos, lovely spot at Hushinish, Luscantire, the park at Tarbert. Not a penny is taken in from any parking charges. We're looking at, I think Councillor Dodson mentioned the education side. That's critically important. And, you know, I hear about the fact that if everybody sits for half an hour or 45 minutes at a ferry, usually bored out of our skull, wondering what to do. I have been at the ferry terminal on many, many occasions, and I'm waiting for my first leaflet, and yet here they're given out to all the tourists coming and going. Maybe it's just not consistent enough. I'm looking at signage for this overnight parking, but of course signage is meaningless when you have one policeman in Harris. It's often very much utilised in Stornoway, and it's not his fault. I mean, we have to look at enforcement, bylaws. We had a meeting the other day with the Minister, the Transport Minister, Graham Day, and one recommendation to perhaps not abolish camper vans, but certainly make an attempt to reduce the volume of them, is to revisit the RET for camper vans. That was never the intention, I don't think, for having all these camper vans. Looking at waste disposal, maybe more signage in that situation. A levy for camper vans, but maybe in January, rather than it just being words and another little conference, let's have some action points. I don't know the legality of it. Could we perhaps look at what bylaws the Western Islands Council are allowed legally to put into place, so we can stick that on a sign to try and dissuade 21 camper vans from overnight parking at a cemetery? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I mean, I mentioned earlier RET evaluation has been done, John, and they are certainly looking at a different pricing structure for caravanettes going forward. And as you know, we raised the issue of the bylaw many a time, and I don't know if Malcolm or Tim are on this meeting. They could mention what's happened in relation to that. But I've got a number of hands here, so Ronald Fraser next. Be useful if we didn't go over the items we've already covered, if at all possible.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I agree with all the remarks everybody has mentioned on this front so far. I wish to come to the leader whose points he raised regarding a levy I wholeheartedly agree with. I recall 3 years ago raising this with Robert Emmett in his previous capacity, and we are still no way forward. I believe it's essential that we now start this process so we can reap any dividends as soon as possible for our islands, because we're potentially missing out on a significant sum of money by not having a levy in place. The rest of the continent do it. Why can't we?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fraser. Councillor John Norman MacLeod.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not going to go over what we're all talking about. I think we all know what the problems are. I just want to say, yes, what Ronald said there was correct. He did speak to Robert Emmett 2 or 3 years ago, and I'm afraid, well, nothing happened. But it's, I mean, a levy is great and all that, and I do support it, but is it going to be the problem from the amount of camper vans, caravanettes, etc., that's coming up to the islands? Have we ever thought of maybe capping the amount that are coming to the islands? It would possibly save a lot of the trouble we've got. They do, I think I mentioned this before, they do it on the Isle of Tidey, where it's capped, and they can only take so many onto each island, or onto their island. So could we not do something similar like that, or even look into it? Thank you.
I think we looked at the issue of capping already, and we were told they couldn't do that because of legislation to do with the qualities and everything else. That's my understanding, that it wasn't possible to do that, John Orman. But as I said, we've got a meeting with Calmac Commercial Director on Friday of this week, so we can raise these points.
Okay, thank you.
I've got Ian McCauley. I don't know if that's a legacy, Ander, if you want to come back in. Go on.
Right, Chair.
Councillor MacDonald, Norman MacDonald, your hand's up as well. Is that also a legacy, Anne?
No, thanks again, Chair. Not a not a member of the committee. Yeah, I just want to go back to the point I mentioned earlier about commercial enterprises and paying for the skip uplifts. I don't want to sound like I'm trying to hammer them, but I'm trying to suggest is, and I follow up on what the leader was saying, and it has been mentioned before, and the convener, about some kind of tax raising or a levy raised to help these commercial enterprises maybe double their uplift of the capacity, of the skips that they're already using, so that they can be cleared more quickly to help alleviate the situation. Whatever we can do to assist these commercial ventures, if they're paying for the uplift once a fortnight, if we could assist them in a more cyclical uplift, to alleviate the pressure on them. If their skips have been uplifted once a fortnight and then full within the first 3 days, then there's a problem. And we don't want to put them out of business by having to charge them or not help with the provision of charging them for the uplift. So, anything we can do in terms of a levy to help, in particular with litter, and I get Councillor Mitchell's point as well with parking. There are issues. We have our own issue down in the Bry camper park as such, but we've seen up to 8 vehicles parking in there and nobody else can park. So there are issues with wild parking as well as wild camping.
Do you want to come back on that, David, the point about commercial? And you feel you've covered it adequately already?
I think I've covered it adequately already, Chair. I think the only thing I would say is that commercial premises, they really are, if they're producing waste, then it's up to them to have capacities that are appropriate and pay for that. If their bins are being abused by other people, then we can help. As I said earlier, we can provide gravity locks for bins. That means that you need a key to open it, but it automatically tips when it goes into the back of the bin lorry. So we can help with that and advise. But ultimately, if the business is generating more waste, then they need to have more bins or a more regular collection frequency.
Okay, David, thank you. I'm seeing Paul Finnegan, Councillor Finnegan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just come back. Just a quick point there about the wild camping. I was speaking to Linda Armstrong, who's the manager at West Harris Trust the other week, and I was having a look around their new facility, and I was asking about the wild camping issue, and she says what she believes, or having spoken to a lot of the camper van owners, is that they don't actually want to wild camp. They would prefer to go into a campsite if they can get one. The issue is they can't get one, and so there's maybe an opportunity there for something that we have to look at as well, and that's maybe a commercial thing for people in Harris to look at. But there's not as many wild people wanting to wild camp as we think, I think. So it's just really that point to bring in.
Thank you, Councillor Finnegan. I have noticed the campsites, the official campsites in Uist are pretty full as well. And I believe that talking to Calmac this morning, the capacity on ferries is quite busy to the end of October, actually. So it seems the season is extending on that particular issue. But remember, for the next 2 years, ferry capacity will be constrained. So,
Chairman.
Yes.
Donald Titan, I'm not a member of your committee. I don't want to prolong the discussion any further, but I think I recall when the proposals from the government came about a tourism tax some years ago. I think we welcomed, well, maybe not welcomed it, but we were quite cautious in terms of our response to that, because if we're proposing a levy now, specifically for camper vans, I think we would be asked also to take account of having a tax for all visitors to the islands, to take account of the tourism tax proposal. So we might have to proceed with some caution, but it's certainly a piece of work that should be looked at to generate some revenue. But there also has to be investment in the infrastructure in terms of providing sites for camper vans that are serviced for their use. And we have the Rural Tourism Fund, which is open. I think we've been successful on a number of rounds with community groups successful there. So that is an option for community states and community groups to look at for funding to invest in the infrastructure to provide service sites to mitigate any other abuse of the environment with waste and so forth. But I think we have to proceed with caution in terms of our levy or tourism tax, and there has to be a wider discussion with the government, not just with Transport Scotland. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Crichton. I think we need to, as you said, proceed with caution, and we will do that. But the view of the committee is quite clear in a way. Yes, convener, can we maybe put this to bed now?
Very briefly, I think there's a huge risk in trying to put a tax on all visitors to the island. It's very specific in relation to the levy that is being done through CalMac. It is impossible to collect a tax for people who come onto the island. So I do think that the best way forward is to take the levy issue to the government and try and put that to bed. And I think we've been in a much better position, and it will encourage other communities who have equal amount of land that they can use, and we should be encouraging them as well to be able to spread the load right across the islands.
Thank you, convener. And finally,
just
leader.
Yeah, I mean, just to
briefly
tidy up on that point. I mean, it is not. We can call it what we like, but it's not really a tourism tax. It is a levy on campervans for improved infrastructure for them. Yeah. So one of the things that we discussed earlier was it must be seen that the money taken in is expended directly on what we intended for, which is to help provide better infrastructure for these campervans. So that's precisely and targeted what we want to do.
Yeah, and as I said, that's something we will raise at the various meetings over the next 2 or 3 weeks, and we'll take something back on the back of that as to what's being said. I'm seeing Councillor Norman MacDonald. Is that a legacy hand, or can we move on?
Just for information, guys.
Briefly.
To do with a levy on motorhomes coming across. I've just been on the CalMac website. I've booked my car on the ferry, and it was £148.10, just a basic standard bog standard for Monday on 2 passengers, £148.10. And a camper van, 6.9 metres on the ferry with 2 passengers is exactly the same price.
Yeah. We know that.
So there's your problem.
Yeah, and that's the hope that the RET valuation report will sort that out. Yeah. Okay, can we move on? You're an expert in caravanettes as well as waste now, David. So,
thank you, Chair.
Insofar as this committee's interests are concerned, the members agree recommendation 3.1. Thank you very much. Now we'll move on to item 6, ferry services. Sound of Barra and Sound of Harris ferry service, socio-economic case for timetable enhancements. This report was considered and supported by the Member Officer Working Group in late July when it was agreed to add the Sound of Harris to the study. Study is now underway, and Angus Murray will speak to the report and answer any questions. Angus, are you still with us?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this report has already been to TNI Member Officer Working Group, who are supportive and who actually asked for the inclusion of the Sound of Harris. The scope of the brief is confined to a socio-economic case for timetable enhancements to the Sound. It's a 13-week study. There'll be a period of consultation. There'll be an online survey. The corner will be consulted, CalMac, Transport Scotland, elected members, officers of the corner, High Trans. So today we're looking to formally approve the corner's 10,000 match funding towards the study. Other funding is being provided by High Trans and Isles Enterprise. So we're looking to have a draft report, hopefully by the next series of meetings. Thank you.
Okay, Angus. Any questions? Any questions for Angus? Councillor Gordon Murray.
Martin Ba, Chair. Good morning.
Martin Ba.
I just wanted to ask, is concessionary fares included in this socio-economic cost-benefit analysis? I would assume you, Chair, would be supportive of including that, given your calls for concessionary fares recently, but is that included in the timetable enhancements? And if it's not, I'm not a member of your committee, but I think it should be. Thanks.
Angus, you want to answer that? I think fares are included. Funnily enough, we went to Barra, I think it was Thursday or last week, and we couldn't get a car onto any of the sailings across to Barra. So quite clearly, demand is quite high for that particular sailing. Angus, fares?
Thanks, Chair. Actually, as you know, that was one of the recommendations from the TNI member of the working group that concessionary fares would be included, and we certainly asked that it be included. But then subsequently, on seeing the brief, it was not included, it was omitted. And I think that was a decision taken by Hightrans, actually. But so the answer is currently concessionary fares are not included within the scope of the brief. However, if I'm instructed to go back to Hightrans, you're basically facilitating this process and say that we actually want concessionary fares to be included within the scope of the brief. I can do that.
Well, I think we should look at fares. I think we should look at fares, Angus. We had a meeting with the commercial operators in Barra last week, and certainly one of the issues was fares that was raised at that one, which I intend raising with Calmac anyway. But I think we should look at the fare structure, not only concessionary, but you know, in terms of commercial costs across both sounds, they're very high in comparison to, for example, Lochmaddy to Uig. So we would need to look at that. So if that could be, with the committee's approval, be put back in, be happy to do that. Yeah. You happy with that, Gordon?
Thanks very much, Chair. That's great. Thanks.
Any further questions from anybody? No. Yes, Councillor Fulton.
It's just the next agenda. I have to declare an interest associated with the Levelling Up Fund.
Okay.
As my name's associated with two of the Levelling Up Fund applications in my previous post.
Okay. Anyway, back to 6. Do members agree recommendation 3.1? Yeah. Okay. We'll move on to item 7 and noting Councillor Fulton's. Yeah. This report provides an update of the UK government's Levelling Up Fund, such as what is known at the time, on progress with the Comhairle Levelling Up Fund bids, and relates specifically to the post-standalone transport bid. Angus Murray will speak to the report, and Colin McKenzie is also available to answer questions on any specific aspects of the post-bid. So are we just talking about the transport bid as opposed to the general bid at the moment, Angus? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Right. Carry on.
The report concerns the Comhairle's proposed transport bid for the next funding round of the Levelling Up Fund. Although we currently don't know when our date will be, we have thought it would be around about October, November, but there's been quite a bit of slippage, and it's possibly looking more like January of next year. So, in a sense, disappointing, but it gives more time to build up a business case for some of the projects that we're intending to submit. We're currently working with Hub North and Stanford to build up business cases for the projects. These projects are appended to the report. The aspiration is to submit a bid of between 20 and 50 million. And in a sense, the major challenge is if there's a bid of up to 50 million, we would require to secure match funding of 5 million. If the bid is less than 50 million, then we just apply 10%. So we would need to apply 10% match funding to whatever value the bid comes to. But at the moment, the aspiration is to have a bid of up to 50 million. So just to note the recommendation.
And are we still working to 400 million available nationally?
Yes.
Yes, so yeah, okay. Callum Mackenzie, do you want to add anything?
Thank you, Chair. Just that we've held a series of workshops over the last couple of weeks with the consultants who are building the application case for us. We had one on the transportation proposals yesterday. So we're just working up more detail on each of these items. One of the things that they are quoting yesterday was that there was 800 million. Now that was news to probably Angus and I, that the allocation to Scotland is 800 million to cover the transportation and the other heritage and regeneration bids. So I'm happy to take any questions on any of the detail there as well, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Callum and Angus. I think Councillor McNeill, you have a question before we go.
Yes, thank you, Chair. At D3 in the list of items that have been applied for, sorry, T2 under the bridges and causeways, you've got the Bernery, Scalfby and North Ford. Is it possible to include the South Ford causeway in that as well, with the historical problems that are there, and obviously they've never been resolved, and we should be looking at keeping it in the mix going forward.
Is that for you, Callum Mackenzie? Councillor McNeill wants to include the South Ford, which has had issues going back a number of years as part of the suite of projects being put forward. Callum?
It's a bit of a difficult question, Chair. We are looking at the flood risk mitigation measures in South Ford as part of the Cycle 1 Scottish Government funding, which I can update progress on that in the concurrent report. Putting it into these critical road links, if we've worked out a priority list, and that bid is based on our priority list, so that the funding that we've applied for through Scottish Government's funds as well would provide match for what we see as the maintaining our current assets in terms of what the structural assessments have highlighted to us. So it is a difficult question, Chair. If it's the mind of the council to include it, then I would include it, but they would need a lot more detail in behind it as well as to the justification for it. So I may be happy to go with the mind of the council on this one, Chair.
Well, I mean, personally, this has been a particular concern of Councillor McNeill since he came into this chamber, and you know, living in the locality and seeing the difficulties. I think personally, for me, and I don't know what the rest of the committee feel, I would want to see it looked at certainly and being included. I don't know what the rest of the committee think.
I would support that as well.
Reader, I see you've got your light on. Is it this particular point or something else?
I mean, I appreciate what Carl Mackenzie is saying in terms of the challenge of it, but if there's no particular downside, and I can't see it, any downside to including it, then I think we should put it in because it is something that is that we've been working on for a number of years. I know it's not any easy or straightforward solutions, but I think that it would help to demonstrate that it's still an important issue to us and it's something that we want to resolve. So I think it would be better in than out. So I'm quite happy to support Councillor McNeill on that.
I think the committee is minded, Callum, to support Councillor McNeill's request. Councillor you had your light on. Is it to do with this particular issue, Councillor MacLeod?
It was really just to record my interest in item at T4, the forward-thinking Euros Varavash with their proposal for a camper van park, which is very appropriate for given the earlier discussion. It just
Is that in the transport bit?
Yeah, well, it's in the
general bit.
I would just record.
Okay, that's fine. Okay. Councillor MacLeod?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to fully support Councillor McNeill, I think it should be in as well.
Okay, Councillor Fraser, Ronald Fraser.
Thank you, Chair. This is a question regarding process. I'm referring to the recommendations at 3.1. I have to say, sometimes it does make me apprehensive when a standing committee of the Comhairle is asked, as we are, to delegate authority away to a few. I feel that in this case, the potential importance and magnitude of this transportation bid warrants conventional democratic involvement, as is our purpose. I therefore would ask if it would be possible that we are kept in the loop, and if members could have advanced sight of final bid submissions.
Seems like a reasonable request. Angus, Colm?
Yeah, I think that's actually in the recommendation. Yeah, the likelihood is that we'll be bringing another report back, given the slippage in deadlines. I think we will probably be bringing a report to more or less every series until we actually have, or if we get a formal approval from the UK government. So, I think we've reported pretty frequently on these funds, and this is no exception. Yeah, members will have sight of a finalised bid prior to submission. Seems perfectly reasonable.
Okay, Angus.
I appreciate that. It didn't make that clear in the 3.1, but thank you for your response, Angus. Thank you.
We'll make sure it's done, Ronald. Don't worry. Chief Executive, do you want to come in?
Yes, Chair, just to confirm what Mr. Murray said there, but the delegation has to remain in case the deadlines are suddenly changed and are not helpful to the committee process. And of course, what we put in and what we put round for members to see will contain what is in the appendix with the addition of with the addition that you've just approved at this meeting. We wouldn't be able to add anything, but we would be able to take comments on on the document which expresses the wishes of the committee and the Comhairle. But the delegation will need to remain because the procedure for submission of bids is so unclear at present. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Chief Executive. I'm seeing Yvonne McKeever's hand up. I'm not quite sure who that is.
Yeah. John Mitchell, Harrison South Lochs, again, not a member of your committee, Chair. Thank you for letting me in again. I'd just like to pick up, maybe I'm being a little bit pedantic, but I'm just picking up the 6.2 there, where it says that the Tarbert accommodation project could potentially apply. I just see that as a wee bit bland from my point of view. I mean, at CNH committee yesterday, it was very clearly stated that it's a serious lack of affordable housing in Harris, well identified. We talked at length about the strategic housing investment programme percentages and the need to perhaps do some restorative work to bring the rural percentage up a bit. And of course, the total inability to attract staff, people in Harris, returning to Harris, hospitality staff, education staff, trusts, care sector, huge amount. And I mean, as I say, I may be just a bit pedantic, but I would rather have seen the phrase something like would hope to access rather than could potentially apply. I mean, the application, I think, has been well established and passed around and so on. It is a very, very serious issue. And I would hope that that issue will be well, and it ticks all the boxes as far as I see from the committee yesterday. And I just would want to see a little bit of a ratcheting up of the necessity of this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. I think the problem was that it didn't fit all the boxes as it related to the criteria. It was my understanding it was quite difficult to match it. But Councillor Murray, do you want to come back on? Angus Murray, sorry. On changing the wording.
Well, thanks, Chair. Well, the council's already agreed that the Tarbert accommodation block would be a backup project. The current shortfall is, as you know, there's a bid. It's a separate bid, and it includes transport, regeneration, culture, and heritage. And that bid has got a maximum funding threshold of 20 million, and we're nearly there. We've got 19 and 70,000. So we have 930 of a shortfall. Now, that would not be sufficient, to fund then the Tarbert accommodation block in its entirety. But we have actually forwarded details of that project to the consultants, for their assessment. But, we're still in a process, and if it transpires that other bids might fall out of the bid, then it frees up funding, for other projects. So, I mean, that's where we're at. But we have actually furnished the consultants with details of that particular project. And as I say, it was already agreed by the council that it should be the backup project.
So when you say the consultants, it's Hub North?
Up North Stantec.
Yeah.
I don't know if you would like to add anything to that.
I'm letting Councillor MacLeod in, and then we're going for a tea break.
Yeah, that's fine. I won't keep you very long. Just a very general point. As a former officer, I know how complex and time-consuming these applications are, and I think we really have to, at this stage, I agree with everything that's been said, let the officers get on with it. I mean, we have to respect their professionalism. It's not a simple matter of writing an A4 report. These applications are intensely complex. I'm just making a plea for the officers to be allowed to get on with it. They'll do the best we can. At the end of the day, some of these applications will be successful, but we shouldn't be trying to lob extra things in at the last minute, because I know what a nightmare scenario that is for officers, and there are less and less officers working for us. So let's respect the professionalism of the officers. Just a general point. Yeah.
You and I were both officers at some point, Alistair, yeah. Councillor Finnegan.
Thanks, Chair. Not a member of your committee again. It's just I'm just trying to get my head, trying to remember what we did agree over the accommodation block. I know it was to be looked at for there was the 50 million coming in for the next tranche or something, and it was meant to come in the next funding bid. I can't remember exactly what was agreed. It's just that it seems to be with that as a backup plan. It's like, well, if it's not needed, then it doesn't get looked at after this. And I just wanted to make sure it still did get looked at, if you know what I mean.
I think the accommodation block is within the 20 million general bid, is it, Callum? Which is not for this committee.
It is, Chair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah. Okay. Just
okay. Right. I think we'll go for a tea and a coffee break and hope the mics work on. Okay, welcome back everybody, and we move on to the next item, which is item number 8, Port Marine Safety Code. This is a regular report to the committee and details the outcomes and progress on the recommendations of the annual review of the Corliss Piers and Harbours by the Chief Internal Auditor in his role as designated person. In compliance with the Port Marine Safety Code, the Comhairle is also required to undertake a 3-year external audit, and following the submission of a report on the initial findings and proposed actions, this committee, as the Corliss Harbour Board, is required to monitor the progress on the outcomes of both reviews. It is anticipated that the latest external audit report and action plan will be completed later this month, and the findings reported to the Harbour Board in December 2021. Kenneth Morrison will give the latest update in progress and answer any questions. Kenneth, Rushit.
Anyhow, thank you, Chair. Just a quick update on that external audit. That yesterday I received the first viewing of that audit. They have finalised it. Well, they've given us a version of it just for client review, and I'm hoping to be reviewing that over the next week. So once that's completed, that audit will get the final report on it, final issue of it. So again, as it says in the report there, we will report it to the board for the December series of the committee. One thing I would add, while they're just in the initial draft, that there is several recommendations within it, but I'm pleased to say that they have come across and assessed us as satisfactory. I'm happy to take any questions on anything else within the report, Chair.
Okay, Kenneth, members, any questions for Kenneth on this particular report? No. Do members agree recommendations 3.1? Agreed, thank you. Right, item 9, Waste Management Services Update. This report provides an update on waste management services, including Recycling Initiative Fund, Service Demand and Benandro Landfill. David, I know we've covered some of this already, and remember Councillor Fulton's question as well, please. David.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think if I start off with the Recycling Initiative Fund, or Recycling Improvement Fund, we have had 2 projects that have passed stage 1 application, the expression of interest stage, and we've submitted a bid for 1.1 million to assist with the rollout of curbside recycling services. So that's a fairly significant level of investment from Scottish Government that would include all the bins that are needed to roll out the services across the whole of Lewis and Harris areas which don't have curbside at the moment. It also includes an electric zero emissions bin lorry that we would use in and around the Stornoway area. There's still issues with range going further afield with electric ones, but it would certainly cover that area, which would free up vehicle capacity to cover the areas that we don't cover at the moment. So that bit, we had initially been told that when the application was made that they would make a decision mid-August, and they would let us know towards the end of August. We've now been informed that it's likely to be middle of October before a decision is made on either of these 2 bids. The second project is more to do with decarbonisation and reducing the carbon outputs of collection. Again, it's something that's very topical with climate change, and it was accepted that it was a good project by the board that looked at the initial expression of interest stage application. So in terms of rolling out the curbside to other areas, once we've got word on the level of funding that we're getting, we'll be able to match that in with our aspirations. If we're not successful, then we'll have a more limited, although we'll be able to roll out, but we'll have a bit more limited in what we can do and how quickly we can move. But if we are successful with this bid, it really makes it a lot easier for us to roll out the service. there's a lot of capital. It is all capital funding, and it means that we can replace bins with the correct colours, as we'd like to do. So that really answers Councillor Fulton's questions about in terms of where we are. We will know mid-October whether we've been successful in this bid or not, and we can report back as soon as we know that informally, but certainly to the December series as to what the programme will be for the rollout. Moving on to Benidorm, the new cell is, I think we've covered 2.3 in the executive summary in detail at the performance management item. So I think that's, I don't think I need to go over that ground again, but 2.4 on the executive summary, Benidorm landfill, we are working with the contractor and the consultant. We're hoping that we can get an additional 1 or possibly 2 years for a relatively small amount of increased costs, and we're working with them just now to confirm whether that's viable or not. It would certainly make an improvement to the life of the cell. And 2.5, we're still looking at options for energy from waste locally. If we can do that, then it takes away the need to look at transporting waste beyond 2025 to the mainland, both in terms of capacity and obviously the cost of landfill itself. Energy from waste is definitely the preferred option if we can achieve it, but it is difficult to find technology that suits. There's nothing obvious available with a track record. So this project, if they can get funding to set up a demonstrator and we can facilitate that, then it could be beneficial both to us and also to the technology developer, because it gives them something that they can build on. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Councillor Fulton, are you happy with the response David's given there? Or do you want to come back?
No, that's great. Thank you, Chair.
Could somebody from committee room 1 ask a question? Not quite sure who it is.
Thank you, Chairman. Donald Clayton, not a member of your committee. I'm in exile here in Committee Room 1. Just a quick question regarding Creed Park. Given the reduction of restrictions, why is it still a requirement for those with vehicles other than cars to still book online to use Creed Park?
Thank you, Chair. If I could note, Chair, that the volume still seems to be a bit of an issue from the chamber. I'm just hearing you no more, but happy to answer that question. We will.
I'm not in the chamber, unfortunately, David.
No, I can, Councillor Crichton, I can hear you quite clearly. It was really just the volume from the chair that was quite low. The system that's in place, we'd been looking at this even prior to the COVID situation. We have had issues in the past where we've had customers turning up at Creed on a Saturday, often with a hired van with material that's not appropriate for Creed. It's not household waste, and with Benidorm closed on Saturdays, this creates a lot of problems with conflict between our staff and the customer, and also potentially could result in fly tipping because they have to put the van back and it may be full of construction waste, for example, a van or a pickup. So that's why we've got it in place. We will do a bit of survey work and see what we can do to make it smoother. It's really that's the main reason for us. We can probably look at trying to make it a bit slicker and maybe streamlining it a wee bit as well. But it's a lot better, both for us and the customer, if they've been in touch beforehand with a van or a pickup load of waste, for us to be able to direct them to the appropriate site for disposal. As I say, particularly at a weekend when Benidorm is closed.
David, thank you. Are you happy with that, Councillor Cratton?
Thank you, Chair. I just hope that people who are using the facility, or just using domestic waste, aren't being punished for the abuse by others of the system. So I hope we can get back to normal as soon as possible. Thank you.
Chair, if I could just come back in, this is something that virtually every local authority in Scotland have in place. A lot of household waste recycling centres won't even accept commercial sized vehicles. We accept that there's quite a lot of people who are involved in activities, crafting or whatever, that will have a vehicle that's sort of multi-purpose, and we want to give them access to site. But it's also true that a lot of people who have that kind of vehicle and are involved in things like crafting think that crafting waste is household waste, which it isn't, and that construction waste, even if it's done by DIY, is household waste, which it isn't. So it's really a mechanism to try and avoid conflict at the site.
Thank you.
Then Councillor Ian MacLeod.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to get an update from David, if at all possible. The deposit return scheme, which we heard some things quite some time ago now, I'm just wondering what progress is being made in that, and at what point we're likely to see the subsidy of that offsetting some of our costs. Is there any update at all on that?
David?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The deposit return scheme is still planned to be in place, probably optimistically at the end of next year, but it could go into early 2023. The plans are still for it to be rolled out to everywhere in Scotland, including the islands. It's going to be quite challenging for them to do the collections here once they've separated the material out, but people should be able to get, if they're paying a deposit, then they need to be able to get the deposit back, and it should be as easy here as anywhere else in the country. That will have an impact on what we see in our blue bins, there's no doubt about that. The other thing that's coming over the horizon is what they call extended producer responsibility, which puts an obligation on producers and retailers of packaging waste to put something in place to recover that. That's a UK, it's not a Scottish government issue. It's not been devolved to Scotland, so it's a UK-wide scheme, and we have been involved in work with RAP, who are doing costing analysis to make sure that areas like the Western Isles are not unfairly disadvantaged by the rollout of schemes which we know historically have allowed producer responsibility to apply in areas like the central belt of Scotland, and where it's relatively cheap to do, and then not worry about the expensive areas like ourselves. So that's due to come in certainly in the next 18 months as well.
Is a comprehensive answer for you, Councillor MacLeod?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, David, for that. I mean, I think it will provide an opportunity for others to realise just the significant costs of addressing waste challenges in an island context. And if we are to recycle, reuse and otherwise get outlets for our diverted waste, there is a significant cost to it. So I'm pleased to hear that there's still no talk of any opt-out or anything like that, which would be absolutely horrendous for us, and that the scheme will be rolled out as it is on the mainland, Scotland and UK even.
Councillor Ian MacLeod.
Thank you, Chair. Just wondering whether in our drive towards net zero carbon, David, have we considered using the HVO? It's a fairly new, commercially available alternative to the current 1202 diesel, which reduces your carbon footprint by 90% on these vehicles. It's a drop-in tank solution that will run anything that's running current gas oil, if you like.
Certainly open to looking at any opportunity to reduce carbon. What we have been looking at primarily is the addition of the hydrogen system to the diesel HGVs. We've got one at the moment. Our electrolyser at Creed has been out of action for a while, but it's due to be replaced with a temporary one, working in partnership with another company. But that's due to to be back up and running, certainly in the next few weeks. That's been our main focus for carbon reduction options. But certainly, if you have details that you could forward to me, I can make sure that we have picked up on that.
Yeah, I'll forward them on to you. It's basically a hydrotreated vegetable oil that can drop into any current vehicle running on 1202, as we know it.
Okay, Councillor MacLeod, so if you pass on the detail to David, we can move on that. Any further questions?
Chair.
Oh, I'm not seeing you down in the corner there.
Just a quick question, Chair, for Mr MacLeod, from a budget board point of view. Could you give us an update on where we are with the 3-weekly rollout that was agreed? I know COVID came into place and delayed things, but I don't see any in this report saying where we are with an update.
Yeah, if you look at the item on the waste horizons, and as I said, we covered that in detail when we're talking about the discussion about the summer peaks. We're having to look at complete redesign of routes to accommodate what happened in the summer, because had we moved over to 3-weekly, I think we would have been in serious difficulty accommodating that 11.2% increase in waste. So the answer is, well, there's two answers. One, the recycling fund application will give us bins and capital and allow us to roll out everything in a one-hour recycling and 3-weekly curbside. And two, we'll have to rerun the modelling for the routes on the software that we have to make sure that we're actually going to be able to accommodate next year's summer peaks, because certainly the designs that we had would not have accommodated that level of increase in the summer months. So I'm happy to report back in December once we know where we are with the funding. But
you happy with that? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Don't see any more hands. So the members agree recommendations 3.1. Agreed, thank you. Item 10, fleet cleansing vehicle replacement. This report seeks approval for the replacement of cleansing services vehicles through the appropriate local authority framework to be financed through prudential borrowing. Further details on costs are provided in the appendix, and the prudential borrowing aspects will be considered by Policy and Resources next week. And Ian Campbell will speak to the report and answer any questions. Ian, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can all hear me. The communications have been sporadic out here in Marybank today, so hopefully I'm clear enough. Just the one thing I just wanted to add, there's been obviously discussion earlier on in relation to delays with the movement of skips from the household waste recycling centres and recycling banks, etc. So with the intention to replace skips, the vehicles have obviously played a big part in some of these delays, and so much as we've experienced quite significant breakdowns in the last year. But the other thing we've experienced is the difficulty in getting parts for these vehicles, whereas historically parts were available from retailers throughout the UK. Now we're having to go into Europe for some of these parts and waiting slightly longer for them. So the only update I would have is that at 6.9, it refers to the kind of the lead time for the delivery of these vehicles. Since the report was written, there's been a slight update on the pickups. The pickups are typically looking to have a similar lead time to that of the Hoocliffe vehicle, of ending up to 26 weeks. So happy enough to get any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Ian. And I'm assuming you heard the detailed discussion at an earlier report and all the issues. Yeah.
Yes, I did.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions from convener?
Just very briefly, in relation to the recommendations there, where the replacement Hoocliffe vehicles are being sourced through Scotland Excel and the pickup vehicles are through the Crown commercial framework. I just wonder whether there is any synergy between the two, or does it have to be completely separate as it is in the recommendation?
Ian?
We'll look at all options for ourselves to get the best value for money for procurement of vehicles and also lead times. So that will be done through Garage and Fleet Services Manager.
David, I see you want to add to it.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's really just to add that Scotland Excel cover the heavy goods specialist refuse collection vehicles and hook lift vehicles, whereas Crown Commercial, it's more again, it's a government, UK-wide government framework, but it covers cars up to light commercials. They don't tend to go into the heavy goods vehicles. So, but we always look at in advance. We always look to see what the best deal is for the Comhairle in terms of pricing, and these two are the most appropriate at the moment.
You happy with that? Yes, good response, David. Thank you. No further questions. Okay. Insofar, yes, Keith.
Yeah, I'd just like to ask Ian Norman relating to the disposal of these vehicles. I can understand transit vans, etc. You may be able to dispose them locally for parts, etc. But is there any enthusiasm to buy our uplifts, the big heavy uplifts, or do we just have to scrap them, period? I mean, I can't see any other local authority buying them or etc. So what happens to them when they've had their day? Thank you.
Ian, what happens to discarded bin lorries, skip lorries, etc.?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the discarded vehicles are made available for sale. Historically, that was done locally. We now do that through a company that advertises these vehicles on our behalf. These vehicles are made available pretty much on an auction basis. Normally, these vehicles carry a reserve, and it'll be the responsibility of the successful bidder to uplift these vehicles from site and take them away, whether they be based in Market Stance or here in Marybank.
Okay, Ian, thank you. Are you happy with that, Councillor Dodson? All very, yeah. Okay, insofar as this committee's interests are concerned, the members agree the recommendation at 3.1. Yeah, okay, thank you. Item 11, Northern Roads Collaboration Joint Committee Annual Report 2020-2021. Under the terms of the Minute of Agreement between the member authorities of the Northern Roads Collaboration Joint Committee, it is a requirement for each authority to submit the Northern Roads Annual Report to the relevant committee. The report provides details of the work being undertaken and highlights opportunities for ongoing and future collaboration. Callum Mackenzie will speak to the report and answer any questions. Callum.
Thank you, Chair. Nothing really to add to the report, other than to say that it is a very useful forum to have. It's good information sharing between our authorities. And practically this summer, we've been able to share our surface dressing equipment as well and gain some additional income for that. So nothing to add to the report other than to say it is a very useful forum to have.
Okay, thank you very much, Callum. And just for Councillor Johnny McKeever's benefit, is there been any movement on the use of plastics on roads? I know we've had some reports at this forum.
There are national pilots on it, but there's similar questions from other local authorities. So there will be reports coming through the joint committee, and when anything comes up on plastic, I will report back to this forum as well.
Thank you very much, Callum. Okay. Right, do members agree the recommendations of 3.1? Yeah, okay, thank you. Item 12, Outer Hebrides Flood Risk Management Update. This report provides an update on the Outer Hebrides Flood Risk Management Strategy and Outer Hebrides Flood Risk Management Plan for planning cycles 1 and 2. The report highlights the recommendations of a report considered by COSLA leaders in late June and the potential impacts on FRM projects, specifically South Ford. It also provides an update on phase 2 of the Dynamic Coast programme. Callum Mackenzie will speak to the report and answer any questions. Callum.
Thank you, Chair. So an update on Cycle 1 is that we have one scheme in Cycle 1, which is the South Ford project. Scottish Government have announced that there has to be a temporary stop on all projects while information is gathered on levels of spend and financial commitments. We would intend to continue the work we're doing with the environmental impact assessment work, which will be key to any project going forward and give much better cost certainty on a future project. The Cycle 1 schemes just now are out for consultation. There's been very little uptake of the consultation process so far from the general public, but it's open until October. We'll be reporting back on that as soon as we have relevant information on it. And there's just a note as well that Dynamic Coast 2 is a further iteration on work that SEPA have been doing on the potential impacts of coastal erosion. So there's some modelling work being done. I haven't had a chance to look at the Western Isles information in some detail, but it is a very useful interactive tool that's been developed that we can report to a future committee and will help us target areas for future investment. So happy to take any further questions on that, Chair.
Remind me where we are with the LIDAR survey that was undertaken probably a year and a half ago, which wasn't quite completed.
They've managed to do quite a bit of the LIDAR work around the Western Isles, although not fully as they'd expected. It is a project run by SEPA, and unfortunately they've run out of money to do any more. But there has been good information collected, especially around about the South Ford area. There's no intention to do further LIDAR, but I just know from the experience of trying to get the specific work done at South Ford, it's very, very weather dependent. Any cloud cover will result in an aborted mission. So we've seen quite a lot of that happening, and that's taken up quite a lot of the cost for SEPA. But there is information being gathered, and it's there, and it's been used as well in this modelling.
I mean, there was more detailed work done on the South Ford and at the Benbecula and Stornoway airports. I just wondered, I was in Barra recently, was Barra included in that work, Colin?
I'll try and get hold of the map of the areas that were covered from SEPA, and I'll get that to you. I can't remember off the top of my head, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McNeill.
Thank you, Chair. Just going back to the South Ford again, I was actually speaking to the chair of the Graysons Committee, Irrigations Committee, a couple of weeks ago. He, like the rest of the community, haven't been consulted in any way. We hear about these EIAs that's continuing. Going Island, nobody knows what's happening. You know, there was a major piece of work done over 10 years ago with a dynamic study that cost $250,000. The recommendations that were there were very clear cut, and you know they haven't been followed through. So, you know, I'm still of the opinion that this has to be really taken back in and looked at properly. With everything that's going on, we've got major problems at the north end of Lochbee now with silting up. It's now affected the local sewage system. That's going to create that. Well, that's created major problems for Scottish Water and for SEPA. So it's about time people kind of started listening to what the community are saying in this, and took the community and the local knowledge on board, or else it's going to be very embarrassing for those that push it on with this project. Thank you, Chair.
You want to comment further, Mr. Mackenzie? I know there are problems just now with Scottish Water and the sewage outfall, isn't it? Yeah, which is
that's right, Chair.
Part of what you're raising at the moment.
Yeah.
No conclusion yet
No.
as to what's happening with that. So, do we have an opportunity for some kind of public engagement on this to inform people where we are with all these various initiatives? Callum.
Thanks, Chair. But we have reported on where we are with each of the initiatives and what the proposals have been and what the recommendations have come from the hydrodynamic study. So where we are just now is engaging with the consultants to undertake this environmental impact assessment, which will involve that consultation process. So that will take place over the coming months. So I can't add anything more to the Scottish Water issue. Wasn't aware of it, but I mean, happy to bring that to the engineer's attention.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an issue of sand building up, of course. So you know, it's part of a package of things that are happening that's of concern to the local member. So I think we need to be kept abreast of what's happening now. This is a process that's taking a very long time, I think is what you're saying.
Yeah.
More engagement, I suppose.
Yeah,
So,
we seem to be putting infrastructure in ahead of the people and what's the people are living on these shores.
You might want to refer the Scottish Water thing directly to Callum at some point.
Yes,
so he's aware
I'm actually hoping to hear back from that at some point. And I get a day or tomorrow, so I'll update Callum on that.
Chair, I'm sorry, we seem to have lost your sound again. Could you? There was a bit of a crackling before we lost you.
Sorry, Chair, not hearing anything.
Can we just check? Can you hear me? No, so I don't think I could hear him.
Yeah, yes, Leader.
You can, okay, so Ushchan's mic.
Chair, we should get Malcolm Nichols to sort it.
No, Chair, still nothing.
Comhairle, how?
Anish.
Callum, are you still there?
I can hear you.
Yes, Chair, I'm still here.
Yes, we're all lost the plot here for a minute or so. I'm not going to repeat what I said earlier, so have you got anything to add to the report on winter maintenance, Callum?
I don't, Chair, other than we're ready to go for this year based on the same policy and delivery arrangements as last year. Just we're in the hands of the weather, as you all know, so we'll continue to report throughout the season.
Okay, any questions from anybody? No. Members happy to agree the recommendations? Yep. Item 14 has been deferred, and the following item is in private, that's 15, so we will move to item 16, reports outstanding. And that's for noting, unless anybody's got any questions. Or...
Can I ask, Chair?
Yeah.
The report on the Stornoway Abattoir, is that still on track to be given at the next series of meetings in December?
So you, David?
Thank you, Chair. We're just as soon as we've got the condition survey report, then we can bring the findings to committee.
You happy with that?
Okay, thanks, David.
Any further questions? I'm not seeing any lights. Okay, and that report's for noting. So we will now conclude the meeting and go into private to consider item 15. The relevant officers and members of the committee should remain, and I will ask all other participants to please leave the meeting now.